Hey everybody, so I want to talk about rivalries, particularly by division, and which division has the best rivalries in the NHL. And I'm not talking about which individual rivalry is the best or anything like that. I'm talking about as a whole, which division has the best interdivisional matchups, interdivisional rivalries between teams on a including majority of their teams on a broader spectrum, not which particular rivalry is great, but which division has the most and the best rivalries. And I'm posing this as a question because I want to know your answer down in the comments section on this, because quite frankly, I don't know. I can't pick one. When you look around the league, there are a lot of great rivalries in the NHL. And every division has great rivalries across the board, and this league as a whole has great rivalries. So I'm posing it as a question because I want your opinion, because I really don't know how to answer this. Just look at the Metropolitan Division. We're going to go through each division here and just talk about some of the great rivalries. Look at the Metro. You have the two New York teams, you have the two Pennsylvania teams, you have New Jersey, and you have Washington. And any time those six teams meet up, any of those six teams, when it's a matchup between those two of those six, it's a great rivalry matchup, and it's a great game. And that kind of leaves Carolina and Columbus on the outside looking in a little bit. But Carolina is developing a very nice rivalry with Washington right now, starting with their playoff series last year. Columbus has a pretty good rivalry going with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they have for a number of years. So you really have all 8 Metro Division teams involved in a major rivalry within their division in some way, but especially the 6 New York area teams, the Pennsylvania teams, the New York teams, New Jersey and Washington. Anytime any of those 6 teams match up with each other, it is a great rivalry matchup and a really good game. So, the Metro is just a great division for rivalries, and they have a lot of really, really strong ones. Whether it's Pittsburgh versus the Rangers, Pittsburgh versus the Flyers, Pittsburgh versus the Islanders, Pittsburgh versus the Capitals. I mean, that's just Pittsburgh. I could go through pretty much any of those other teams as well and do the same thing, and it's a great rivalry across the board. Washington and New York, Washington and the Islanders, Washington and the Flyers, Washington and New Jersey. I could go through every team almost and do that in that Metro division. And that's a great division without a doubt for rivalries. But you move over to the Atlantic, and you look at the Atlantic division, you've got Boston, Montreal, you've got Boston, Toronto, you've got Toronto, Montreal, you've got anytime the 3 Canadian teams in that division, Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto, anytime either of those teams match up with each other, that's a really good rivalry game and a good Canadian rivalry. Then you add in Buffalo and Boston, Buffalo and Toronto, Buffalo and Montreal. Pretty much throw Buffalo in against any of those other teams, and it's a good rivalry game. Tampa Bay finds their way in there. Tampa Bay's got a pretty good rivalry going on with the Boston Bruins. And then, you've got Tampa and Florida, interstate rivalry there. So it's the same thing in the Atlantic, whereas you put any of these divisional opponents together, and a lot of times it's a really good matchup. And Boston and Detroit even, that's not a traditional rivalry, but Boston and Detroit over the last few years have played some very heated games with one another. So, obviously the ones that stand out to me are the 3 Canadian teams, and then you throw in the Bruins and Sabres. And any of those 5 teams, when they match up, is certainly a rivalry game and a really good rivalry game. But, you throw Tampa Bay in there as well. Tampa has some good rivalries going on right now. Florida's a little bit on the outside looking in, but them and Tampa Bay have a good rivalry as an interstate rivalry between the Lightning and Panthers in Florida. So, and Detroit and Boston have a bit of a rivalry going on these past few years and playing some very heated games with one another. So the Atlantic Division, while I don't think it's necessarily as good as far as the number of rivalries as the Metro, it's very good in the quality of rivalries, especially Boston, Toronto, Boston, Montreal, Toronto, Montreal. Throw Buffalo in there a little bit, and you've got some great rivalries going on in the Atlantic as well. And then moving over to the Western Conference, the Central Division is just, I mean, talk about where every game is a rivalry. Anytime it's an interdivisional matchup in the Central Division, it's a very physical game. It's a rivalry game. It's a nasty game. That whole division is one big rivalry. In my mind, without a doubt. I mean, you could pick any team from the Central and then match them up against any other team in the Central, and it's a rivalry game, and it's a really heated, nasty matchup. And that's how that division has been now for the past couple of years. So, you know, I think the Central's right up there with the Metropolitan as far as, you know, just sheer number of rivalries in the division. And then you have the Pacific. And the Pacific Division gives us some incredible rivalries as well. Vegas and San Jose, which I think is the best rivalry in the NHL right now. Edmonton and Calgary, the Battle of Alberta, that really heated up last year and took off last year. And I think that's going to carry over into this season. Los Angeles and Calgary have really been going at it over the last few years, particularly the rivalry, the personal rivalry between Matthew Tkachuk and Drew Doughty, which is one of the best in the league. Oh, while we're talking about personal rivalries, go back to San Jose, Vegas, and you have the Ryan Reeves versus Evander Kane personal rivalry as well. So the Pacific gives us a lot of great stuff as well. Maybe not as much as some of the other divisions, but there are some really heated rivalries in that division as well. And then the California teams, San Jose, LA, and Anaheim, that's kind of died down a little bit, but if you go back 2-3 years ago, anytime either of the California teams played each other, that was a huge rivalry game. So that's died down a little bit, especially since Anaheim's had such a bad season last year, and the Kings have really fallen off into being one of the worst teams. But that could, I mean, it's not going to take much for that to come back. All it's going to take is one nasty hit or one heated game, and all of a sudden you're going to get the California teams all over each other again. So there are some great rivalries in the Pacific Division as well. So I want to know what you guys think. Which division do you think has the best interdivisional rivalries in the NHL? I think it's really hard to pick because they all have some tremendous ones. I think the Metro and the Central Division stand out to me just because of literally every game when any of those teams play each other is basically a war, and those really stand out. But you can't forget about the Atlantic Division, especially the top of the Atlantic Division with Tampa Bay, Boston, Toronto, Montreal all involved with each other, Buffalo getting in there as well. You know, it's a really difficult question to answer, and there are so many great matchups across the league, and that's what makes hockey so great. The rivalries are what makes hockey go, and why the league is as good as it is and as fun to watch as it is. But I was just thinking about it this morning, like, which division has the best rivalries? And I was like, I have no idea. So I figured I would ask you guys and pose it as a question and see what we get for answers down in the comment section below. So please like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.